At 3:47 a.m., Lila Chen woke to a sound that wasn't a sound at all. It felt like a murmur behind her right ear, a soft, damp pressure, a pulse that didn't belong to her. She lay still and listened. The apartment was quiet, refrigerator humming, pipes clinking faintly in the wall. Outside, a train rumbled and was gone. The murmur lingered. Lila slid a hand up in her hair and flinched. There, just behind the curve of her ear, was a lump the size of a pea. Hot, tender wrong. She slipped out of bed, crossed the chilly floor to the bathroom, and flicked on the overhead light. The mirror showed a face heavy with sleep, eyeliner smudged under dark eyes, hair pulled into the loose ponytail she wore at the bookstore when the evening crowd demanded quick restocks. She turned her head and parted her hair. The skin behind her ear was red and taut. At the center of the swelling, a dark speck sat like a freckle that hadn't been there yesterday. She pressed gently and winced. The ache pulsed harder, a tiny drumbeat on skin. Pimple, she told herself. Ingrown hair, a bite. She rinsed a washcloth in cold water, held it against the lump until the throbbing eased, then went back to bed. For an hour she drifted in and out, counting breaths. The murmur came and went. When her alarm buzzed at 6:15, the ache woke with it. In the kitchen, she made tea on autopilot. The kettle hissed. The dim ceiling light flickered. She checked the lump with 2 fingers while the mug warmed her other hand. Still there, maybe bigger. She swallowed the anxiety with her first sip. Great, she muttered. Perfect day for this. At the bookstore, dust and chatter swallowed thought. Pages rustled. The register beeped. Orders piled up on the counter. Lila smiled on instinct, shelving books, joking with regulars. Every time she tilted her head right, her glasses brushed her cheek, and the lump throbbed in response. By 10 a.m., her ponytail tugged the sore spot so sharply she slipped into the back and retied it looser. Everything okay? Nora, the shift lead, poked her head in. Just a dumb zit, Lila said, forcing a grin. Behind my ear. Warm compress tonight. Don't pick. Ma'am, I would never, Lila said with mock solemnity, then rolled her eyes as soon as Nora left. At lunch, she texted her sister, Sarah. Do glands swell from stress? Sarah replied instantly. Yes, also from bites. Also from life. You okay? Yeah, just annoying. By afternoon, the ache had shifted. Not sharper, stranger. Heat radiated along the bone behind her ear. A faint pressure crept toward her temple. Once, while stacking hardcovers, she felt a single electric jolt that made her drop a book and curse. Go sit, Nora ordered, no argument allowed. 5 minutes. In the bathroom, Lila angled her phone flashlight and leaned into the mirror. The lump was the size of a grape now, the skin shiny. That central dot looked darker, like a tiny pore. When she breathed, she could swear it pulsed in time. She cleaned it with a wipe from the first aid kit, dabbed antibiotic ointment, and went back to the shelves. The rest of the shift, the world narrowed to titles and customers and the pulse under her skin. After close, she rode the subway home, hood up. The city blurred past, neon reflections on wet pavement, the glow of other lives. Back in her apartment, she took a hot shower, letting water drum on the sore spot. The heat helped. For a blissful minute, the ache faded. She exhaled, forehead against tile. When she stepped out and dried her hair, the pain returned, sharper for having gone. She pulled her hair aside and froze. The dark speck had opened into the thinnest slit, and as she watched, so close the mirror fogged with her breath, something just beneath the surface shifted. A shiver ran under the skin, small as a blink. Lila's stomach dropped. She held still, hardly breathing. The slit glistened. Nothing moved. She laughed once, a breathless sound that wasn't a laugh at all. Okay, she said aloud to the empty bathroom. You're tired. It's a pimple. Stop being gross. She patted on more ointment, covered it with a small square of gauze, and climbed into bed with an ice pack wrapped in a dish towel. The cold numbed the ache enough to let her drift. At 1:32 a.m., she woke to the murmur again, closer now, a pressure from the inside out. She lay rigid, palms sweating. The room was dark except for the streetlight's glow across the ceiling. She reached up and felt that the gauze was damp, warm. Her breath quickened. She slid out of bed, flicked on the bathroom light, and peeled the tape back carefully. Clear fluid beaded at the slit. The skin around it was darker, bruised at the edges. She swallowed and leaned in. Something thin and pale rose into the opening like a thread tasting air, then slipped back inside. Lila jerked backward so hard her shoulder hit the doorframe. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." Her hand shook. She grabbed her phone, scrolled to Sarah with clumsy thumbs, and hit call. It rang twice. "Lila." Sarah's voice was sleep-rough. "What's wrong?" "There's something behind my ear." It moved. A beat of silence. "Is it a tick?" "I don't know. It's under the skin." "Okay, listen to me." Sarah's voice snapped into focus, steady. "Don't squeeze it. Don't poke. Put clean gauze on it. I'm coming." "It's 1:30 in the morning." "I'm coming." The call ended. Lila stood there, phone still pressed to her ear, heart pounding so hard the world blurred at the edges. She tore open a fresh gauze pad with her teeth and pressed it gently to the spot. The pressure inside answered back, a small, insistent thud. She paced the living room barefoot, lights off, counting her breaths. She tried to pray and couldn't find the words. She tried to think of anything else and found only the mirror image burned behind her eyelids. The slit, the shimmer, the pale thread. 20 minutes later, keys rattled. Sarah slipped in, hoodie over pajamas, hair in a loose braid. "Let me see." She said no hello. Lila sank onto the couch and pulled her hair aside. Sarah used her phone flashlight, hands gentle but sure. "It's swollen," she murmured. "Center opening looks like a breathing hole." "A what?" Sarah met her eyes. "I'm not saying anything until a doctor does." "Shoes. We're going." "I can't afford." "Stop." Sarah's voice softened. "We're not waiting on money for this." Lila nodded because fear had climbed up behind her throat and sat there like a stone. She slipped into sneakers with trembling fingers. As they headed for the door, a damp warmth touched the side of her neck. She pressed the gauze harder, and for an instant, no more than a heartbeat, she felt a tiny, undeniable push from under her skin, as if something alive inside her had decided to meet the night. The hospital urgent care, at 2:15 a.m., was a fluorescent blur. Plastic chairs, stale coffee smell, a television muttering news updates nobody cared about. Sarah guided Lila to the check-in desk, one hand on her shoulder as if to keep her from collapsing. The triage nurse looked up, brisk but polite. "What brings you in tonight?" Lila hesitated, hearing how crazy it would sound. Sarah jumped in. Infection behind her ear, growing fast. Possible abscess. The nurse typed quickly, then glanced at Lila. "Any trouble breathing? Chest pain? Dizziness?" Lila shook her head, clutching the gauze tighter against her skin. She felt the pulse beneath it like a second heartbeat, small but insistent. They waited 15 minutes, 25. The waiting room TV looped the same segment about a local fire. Lila's leg bounced uncontrollably. Sarah kept whispering, "You're okay. Just a lump. They'll drain it." Finally, a door buzzed open. Chun, a resident in green scrubs, led them into a curtained bay. He introduced himself as Dr. Kim, asked Lila to sit on the gurney. "Let's take a look." She pulled her hair aside with trembling fingers. The gauze was damp again. When Kim peeled it back, his eyebrows lifted. The lump was bigger. In the bright hospital light, the skin glistened, stretched almost to bursting. At the center, the slit widened slightly, as if it were breathing. Kim masked his surprise quickly. "Likely a sebaceous cyst," he said. "Infected. We'll numb the area, lance it, drain pus. Pretty straightforward." Sarah frowned. "But it moves." Kim glanced at her, then at Lila. "Sometimes patients feel throbbing as fluid shifts. It can seem like movement. Nothing to worry about." Lila wanted to believe him. She wanted desperately to accept his calm certainty. But she remembered the pale thread rising from the slit. She remembered the push against her gauze. "Can I see it?" she asked in a small voice. Kim Sai pulled on gloves. "Let's just open it up. You'll feel relief after." A nurse appeared with a tray. Lidocaine, scalpel, gauze. Lila gripped Sarah's hand so tightly her knuckles whitened. "Deep breaths," Kim said. He injected anesthetic, waited, then pressed the skin lightly. Lila nodded, though she still felt pressure. Kim made a small incision. A thin stream of fluid oozed out, clear, tinged with yellow. The smell was sharp, sour. "See," he said, almost cheerful. "Simple drainage." But then the slit flexed. Lila felt it even through the numbness. A ripple under skin. Something slid forward. Kim froze, suction tube in hand. For a moment, the world held its breath. Then a pale shape emerged, thin, segmented, writhing faintly in the light. The nurse gasped. Sarah's hand clamped down on Lila's. Kim quickly grasped it with forceps and pulled. It resisted for a heartbeat, then tore free with a wet sound for centimeters long, slick, twitching even in the air. He dropped it into a metal dish where it curled and uncurled like something searching. Lila gagged. Sarah whispered, "Oh my God. Oh my God." Kim cleared his throat. "Okay, that was unexpected." The nurse whispered, "That wasn't a cyst." Kim nodded stiffly. "We'll send it to pathology. Right now, we need to flush the cavity. Make sure nothing else remains." He irrigated the wound with saline, his face tight. Clear fluid washed out, followed by another ripple. This time, the forceps brought out a smaller one, barely 2 centimeters, squirming weakly. Lila felt her vision narrow to a tunnel. "How many?" she croaked. Kim didn't answer. He dropped the second one into the dish, covered it quickly, and pressed fresh gauze to her skin. "We'll admit you overnight," he said quietly. "4 antibiotics, observation. Tomorrow morning, we'll do imaging. Make sure this isn't more extensive." Sarah demanded, "What is it?" Kim's voice was flat. "Looks like larvae, possibly botfly. Rare, but not impossible with travel. Did you leave the country recently?" Lila shook her head violently. "I work at a bookstore. I've never even been out of the state." Kim's expression didn't change, but his eyes flickered. "Then we'll let pathology tell us." They wheeled her upstairs to a quiet ward. The room smelled faintly of bleach and plastic curtains. Sarah curled up in the visitor chair, arms crossed, eyes wide open. Lila lay still, afraid even to breathe. Every throb behind her ear felt like a warning. Every faint tick of the 4 pump sounded like footsteps. At 3:22 a.m., when Sarah finally dozed off, Lila touched the bandage gently. For a moment, nothing. Then, so faint she almost convinced herself it wasn't real, she felt it. A small, undeniable shift, like something still alive beneath the gauze. Lila didn't sleep. The 4 hissed quietly beside her bed, dripping antibiotics in her veins, but no medicine could touch the panic inside her chest. Every time she shifted, she swore the pressure behind her ear shifted back, like something alive, refusing to be ignored. By morning, the room had changed. Sunlight filtered through thin blinds, painting stripes across the linoleum floor. Sarah was still in the chair, hoodie pulled tight, hair sticking up. She stirred awake when a nurse came in with breakfast trays. "Any pain?" the nurse asked briskly. Lila's laugh was sharp. "Yes, it feels like something's inside my head." "Because it is." The nurse offered a sympathetic smile, but said nothing. She changed the bandage, cleaned the wound with practiced hands. The gauze was stained pink and yellow. When she pressed gently, Lila flinched. "There's still swelling," the nurse murmured. "Doctor will be here soon." Dr. Kim returned mid-morning with another physician, older, calm, with graying hair at his temples. "This is Dr. Rao, ENT specialist," Kim explained. "He'll be consulting on your case." Rao examined the wound closely. His gloved fingers were gentle but firm as he pressed around the swelling. "Tender here." Lila winced. "Everywhere." "Zao not that, Flau. We're scheduling imaging. CT scan first, maybe MRI. We need to know how deep this goes." "How deep?" Lila repeated. Rao's eyes met hers. "Serious. We pulled 2 larvae," Kim added. "There may be more." The words hollowed the room. Sarah's hand shot to Lila's arm. Lila's pulse thundered in her ears. 30 minutes later, she was in radiology. The CT machine whirred loudly as it rotated. Lila lay perfectly still, a cage over her head, the buzzing filling her skull. She closed her eyes and tried not to think about what might be moving under her skin. Afterward, she sat in the hallway with Sarah, both in silence, until Rao reappeared with films in hand. He motioned them into a small consultation room where the scans glowed on a monitor. Lila squinted. The cross-sections of her skull looked alien, all grayscale shadows. Rao pointed to the area just behind her ear. There, he said. Even with no training, Lila saw it. Irregular pockets beneath the skin and muscle, clustered like small caverns. How many? Sarah whispered. Rao's jaw tightened. At least 4, maybe more. Some overlap, so hard to count. Lila's stomach flipped. Inside me right now. Yes, Rao said simply. This is not a simple cyst. We're dealing with multiple infestations. Surgery will be necessary. Kim added, we'll schedule for this afternoon. General anesthesia. We need to explore the area thoroughly and remove all organisms, otherwise risk of secondary infection, tissue necrosis. Even Sarah cut him off sharply. She doesn't need worst-case scenarios right now. But Lila had already heard enough. Necrosis. The word clung to her ribs like ice. She signed the consent forms with a shaking hand. The hours until surgery crawled. Nurses prepped her with 4 fluids, clipped her hair near the site, explained protocols. Sarah tried to joke, you'll get a cool scar like a spy. But her smile broke halfway. Lila stared at the ceiling, whispering to herself, it's coming out. It's coming out. At 1:45 p.m., they wheeled her into the operating suite. The room was blindingly bright, filled with stainless steel instruments and masked faces. The anesthesiologist leaned over her with practiced calm. Deep breaths, Lila. Count backward from 10. She barely reached 7 before darkness swept her under. When she woke, the lights were softer, the room quiet except for the beep of a monitor. Her throat was dry, her tongue thick. She tried to move, but a bandage wrapped tight around her head anchored her still. Sarah's face hovered above her, pale with worry. You're okay. You're out. Lila swallowed, voice raspy. All gone. Sarah hesitated just long enough. Lila's chest clenched. Sarah, tell me. Her sister's eyes flicked away. The doctor said they found more than expected. 7, maybe 8. Lila's stomach twisted. Maybe. Sarah's voice dropped. They think they got them all, but one cavity was deep, near the bone. They couldn't be sure. The operating room pulsed with the steady rhythm of machines. Beep, hiss, beep. While a dozen hands moved in precise choreography, stainless trays gleamed under the surgical lamps. The smell of antiseptic and cauterized skin hung heavy in the air. Dr. Rao stood at the head of the table, eyes sharp above his mask. Beside him, Kim adjusted suction while 2 scrub nurses anticipated every command with silent efficiency. Lila lay unconscious, her head secured, a wide, sterile drape exposing only the swollen area behind her ear. Scalpel, Rao said quietly. The blade slid through inflamed skin with practiced ease. A thin line of blood welled, quickly blotted by gauze. Rao deepened the incision, careful, deliberate, until the cavity yawned open. Almost immediately, movement shimmered beneath the light. Jesus, one nurse muttered. Something pale shifted inside the pocket of tissue, writhing weakly, disturbed by air. Rao steadied his hand, reached with forceps, and pulled. The larva stretched grotesquely, its segmented body resisting, anchored in damaged flesh. Finally, it tore free with a sickening pop, twitching violently as it dangled from the forceps. Into the dish it went, where it curled and uncurled as if seeking. That's one, Rao said, voice flat. I want them all. They flushed the cavity with saline. More shapes stirred, smaller but alive. Rao extracted them one by one, each with its own stubborn grip. The metal dish filled slowly, a grotesque collection of pale, writhing bodies. Kim whispered, How many is that? 5, Rao answered. Keep count. The 6th was lodged deeper, nestled against the mastoid bone. Rao angled carefully, forceps slipping twice before finding purchase. When he pulled, the larva clung with barbed hooks, tearing tissue as it resisted. Blood surged. The nurse passed it instantly. He stemmed the bleeding, jaw tight, then resumed. With a final twist, the larva released. This one was larger, nearly 5 centimeters, its body pulsing faintly in the air before it hit the tray. 6, Kim said, voice thin. The room was quiet except for suction and the steady hiss of oxygen. Rao leaned back for a moment, eyes narrowing at the cavity. There's still something. He guided a probe deeper. The tip struck resistance. The monitor showed shadows pressed against bone, irregular, overlapping. Rao reached carefully, slowly. The tissue trembled around his instrument. Then, with sudden force, a larva erupted upward, writhing violently, thicker than the others. It twisted as though fighting to escape the light. One nurse gasped and stepped back. Rao held steady, gripping tight. Get it contained. It came free with a wet, tearing sound, longer than his thumb, its body thrashing even outside the wound. Kim dropped it into the dish, slammed the lid shut. The noise of it scraping against metal echoed in the room. That's 7, Kim said, his voice shaking. But Rao's gaze remained fixed on the cavity. His tone was grim. There's space for another. Could be dead. Could be deeper. He probed again, flushing saline, searching every crevice of tissue. Nothing moved. No resistance. Only raw flesh and slow bleeding. Finally, after minutes that stretched into forever, Rao sighed. We've cleared what we can. If there's another, it's dormant. We'll monitor post-op. The nurses began closing the wound layer by layer, stitching skin over the hollow that had once held invaders. Gauze soaked with antiseptic pressed down, bandages wound tight around Lila's head. The dish of larvae sat sealed on the tray, 7 pale bodies still writhing faintly in the shallow pool of fluid. One of the nurses couldn't stop glancing at it, her face pale under the mask. When it was over, Rao stripped off his gloves, shoulders heavy. He looked at Kim. Prepare the family. Be honest but measured. Tell them we removed several. Tell them we'll know more after pathology. Don't promise more than we can. Kim nodded, though his own eyes betrayed unease. As they wheeled Lila into recovery, the sealed dish was carried down a separate hall toward pathology. Inside, the larvae twisted blindly, pressed against plastic walls, still alive even after the light. And back in recovery, as Sarah rushed to her sister's side, Lila stirred briefly under anesthesia. Her lips parted, a whisper barely audible. Still moving. Sarah froze, gripping her hand tighter. No, you're safe now. You're safe. But even she wasn't sure she believed it. Lila awoke to the smell of bleach and the low hum of monitors. Her throat was raw, her mouth dry. Bandages hugged the side of her head tight, pulling whenever she shifted. Sarah was there instantly, leaning forward in the chair with dark circles under her eyes. You're okay, she whispered. It's over. Lila swallowed, her voice hoarse. All gone. Sarah hesitated too long, then forced a smile. They removed a lot. You'll be okay. But the memory of Rao's expression lingered. Serious, unreadable. Lila didn't push. Not yet. The days after surgery blurred together. Pain meds, nurses changing dressings, doctors murmuring updates. Every time they peeled the gauze back, Lila refused to look. She stared at the ceiling, gripping Sarah's hand, afraid to see an empty hollow where something once lived. Dr. Rao visited on the 3rd morning, pulling up a chair, file in hand. Pathology confirmed multiple larvae, likely botfly species, though not typical for this region. Unclear how exposure occurred. Lila rasped, but they're gone? Zhao Bao said. We removed 7. Imaging suggested 8 cavities. We believe one may have been empty, a shadow, but we cannot say with 100% certainty. Her chest clenched. So there could still be one inside me. Rao's voice softened. We'll monitor closely. Antibiotics, follow-up scans. If symptoms return, pain, swelling, you come back immediately. Lila nodded faintly, but inside, terror bloomed. When Rao left, Sarah muttered, doctors never promise. Doesn't mean you're not safe. But neither of them believed it fully. 2 weeks later, Lila was discharged. At home, the apartment felt smaller, walls closing in with every shadow. She avoided mirrors. She washed her hair carefully, fingers skirting the bandage scar. Sometimes late at night, she swore she felt pressure there again, a faint pulsing like a murmur trying to return. She told herself it was nerves healing. She told herself it was nothing. But doubt sat heavy on her chest. Sarah stayed most nights, camped on the couch. "It's healing," she'd remind Lila, pointing at the clean bandages. "Look, no redness, no pus. You're fine." But Lila's dreams betrayed her. She saw the dish in the oar, pale bodies writhing against stainless steel. She woke, gasping, clawing at her bandage, convinced something was crawling out. At her 1-month checkup, the scar was healing well. Rao traced the line with gloved fingers, nodding. "Good progress, strong tissue, no new swelling." "Then it's gone," Lila said quickly. Rao looked at her for a long moment, then said, "There's no sign of recurrence. That's what I can tell you today. Not yes, not no, just today." Back home, Lila stood in the bathroom, hair tied back, mirror glaring under bright light. She pulled the bandage aside. The scar stretched thin and pink, jagged against her skin. She touched it gently. No pain, no heat. But deep inside, she swore she felt a flutter. She dropped her hand and whispered, "Stop. Stop imagining." Sarah knocked on the door. "You okay?" Lila forced a smile into her voice. "Yeah, just checking it." Weeks passed. She returned to work, moving slower, hair always down to hide the scar. Customers didn't notice. Colleagues didn't ask. Only she knew the story stitched into her skin. Sometimes in the bookstore rush, when the register beeped and pages rustled, she felt it again. A faint shift behind her ear, like something waiting. She shook it off. She had to. But every night, lying in bed in the silence before sleep, she pressed 2 fingers gently against the scar. And every night, she wondered if she was feeling the beat of her own pulse or the echo of something that still lived.